Hello, folks. This is Chris, KY4CKP, and this week on LCARA Ham Radio for our monthly Hands On With LCARA event, we were fortunate enough to have Cory Gibson from DX Engineering W3JL come by and talk to us about emergency communications. If you've been following the channel, you know that we've been working for the past year and a half or more on our EmComm trailer. We've been hitting several events, like we did a video on the Jeep Trail Run. But it's never too late to learn more about proper emergency communications and how ham radio can help the community with our hobby. So that's what's coming up next on LCARA Ham Radio.
Emergency communications, what is it? Why do we talk about it? What's it used for? How do you get it started in your county, in your area? What are the different organizations for emergency communications? There's actually some stuff written into Part 97 of the FCC talking about emergency communications. It's a really good aspect to give back to, our counties and things like that. It's part of the hobby. That it's one of the things that actually got me into the hobby, just because I really enjoy, kind of being ready for things like that. So what are some of the different organizations? What are the possible requirements for becoming a member? I mean, this is something that, you pretty much have to work out as your organization, but we'll give you some of the different requirements that are out there and why you want certain things versus others. Prepare and practice. This is one I can never stress enough to people. You try and do these things, and I've seen some good events. I've seen some bad events, in practice and in actual emergency situations. And the more you practice, the more prepared you're going to be. I'd rather have those bad events when we're doing the preparation and we're practicing, than that way when the emergency happens, we just fall into it. We do the same thing, when you work, I worked in a mill and we prepared for different drills and first aid and things like that. And, that way when it actually happened, nobody's trying to figure things out. We kind of know where to go. When we talk about emergency communication, what are the goals? Why are we here? What's the purpose of this? And everybody has some different ideas, but, here's kind of, some ideas that I've worked out in our group that works pretty well. And then obviously some techniques. Some things that can be used in an emergency to help us reach our goal. Kind of got to define what you want to do, and then you figure out how you're going to do it. Then you practice and you find things that help you make that happen. That's what we're going to talk about. There's two real organizations that come about from amateur radio service, and in Pennsylvania, I'm in Ohio now, but I'm still involved with the Pennsylvania group. They kind of combine these into one, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But RACES, the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service, this is the one that is actually specifically called out in Part 97. There's rules on what you can do, how you can train, how often you can train. There's a little bit more structure to this. This is called by a civil defense organization. So this is called by your county EMA, your state EMA. RACES is the group that kind of interfaces with that government organization. Then there's ARES. ARES is the Amateur Radio Emergency Service, and this is the ARRL's arm of emergency services and emergency communication. And the ARRL has some, guidelines and things with it that are a little bit different, but these two can coexist and they can mesh. It's really weird that, sometimes people ask me like this is just really confusing. And it's not really that confusing. RACES is specifically called out in Part 97. It's Part 97.407 with rules as to who they can contact, how long the drills can last. For RACES, it actually spells out you're only allowed to have 1 hour per week of drills. It's generally only active during the emergency, and it's at the request of that organization. So our emergency management organization will call us up and say, we need communications. We need to call you guys out. All right, we'll come out. We provide the communications, and we usually provide those communications during the emergency. APRS is usually called out by a served agency. So not necessarily a government organization, but this could be the Red Cross for one. Red Cross is a big one that pairs with us in APRS. And it's, we're providing health and welfare and some other type of things instead of actual communication between, the emergency response groups. APRS is just covered by the general license, so it's a little bit more flexible. You can practice a little bit more. You can talk to non-RACES stations. You can talk to other APRS stations. You can talk to other amateurs. APRS can be activated before, during, or after an emergency, and it's usually to support that served agency. Some of the other served agencies we use, like the MS bike group, the MS 150 guys, we do a lot of stuff with them to help provide communication. It's not really in that sense emergency communication, but we use these groups as training. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into some of those organizations. For our organization, to be in RACES, you have to be registered with that civil defense organization, whether it's the county emergency management agency, the state emergency management agency. You have to be registered with them. These organizations use what's called the Incident Command System. This is actually a FEMA, a Federal Emergency Management System. It's a way they structure themselves when they're doing incidents and when they're taking over different things. And this training is required in our group. It was required to have this FEMA training, this ICS Incident Command training. We had to have ICS 100, 200, 700, and 800. Each one goes into different details of the incident command system and how incidents are run. Because when you're called by this state agency or this county agency to provide emergency service, you're going to come in and you're going to be a communications, you're going to do this, this, and this. And there's certain ways, if they ask you, to go talk to the incident commander or talk to the public information officer, you kind of got to know who's who and how that structure works. So, that incident command, you understand operations, planning, logistics, and finance, because that's all part of the way these guys handle their incidents. So if you don't practice this stuff, you'll never be prepared for it. So you got to participate in meetings and drills. For our group, we had quarterly meetings. So four meetings a year. You had to at least attend 3 of those 4 meetings. Understand that, sometimes people can't make everything, but you got to be part of the meetings. You got to be part of the drills. When we talk about drills, we kind of try and combine some of the drills where we can. Like I said, actually in Pennsylvania, they've combined RACES and APRS into a thing called ACS, which is Auxiliary Communication Service. So when you look at the Pennsylvania FEMA website, it actually talks about ACS, and this includes GMRS, this includes CB guys. I mean, this can include all sorts of stuff, but amateur radio makes up the bulk of that. But our old section emergency coordinator, Harry Bloomberg, I remember when I started, he was our section emergency coordinator, W3JL, and he could be quoted. He says, I don't want the first time we meet to be during an emergency, because we've had that happen where we call up an emergency, goes out on the repeater, and people start showing up like crazy. And these are people we've never trained with. Some people we don't even see at club meetings, and we're like, who are you? And we don't want that, because you don't mesh as well. You don't know how people work. So for our group, we had to have, participation in a certain amount of meetings and drills. Our county EMA also wanted all of us to have hazmat recognition class, and they provided the training for us. It was great. It's not to be a responder. This is just a recognition class. But when, our county had two big interstates, some rail, different things like that. And if you get called to a scene to help with communications, something takes out a communications in an area and it's possibly a hazardous spill, you want to be able to recognize what you're getting into and what you see. So we're in there with the fire department. They talked about the hazmat labels, how to be able to see from afar, kind of, okay, that's a tanker. That's got a red triangle on it. Oh, I can see the number, how to use the book to figure out what, how far you need to stay away, because the last thing you want to do is run into something, and be a part of the situation that needs help. We're here to help, not need help. So that's why we were there. I said, we're expected to be responders to this, but for our own safety, it was best to how to tell what we're dealing with. So those are some of the requirements. I mean, there's a lot of other things that you can do. but the main thing, at least for RACES, was to be registered with that organization. We do get a county badge. Some guys wanted to join just to get the county badge, to be, oh, I've got a county badge, gets me into the emergency center and this and that. That's not the main reason you should be going into this. The reason we went into this was to be able to provide something to the community. We had some tornadoes come through our area many years ago, and we were able to help. When some of the fire department repeaters went down, we were able to help. We rode along with them and coordinated road cleanups and things like that. We were at the Red Cross shelters helping with health and welfare traffic, letting people know where their loved ones were and that they were okay, or what we could, anything that we could on that aspect. So when we talk about the RACES drills, when it comes to RACES drills, like I said, you can only have 1 hour of training a week. We do a weekly emergency net on HF. These usually last about 20-30 minutes. We go through and we call out all of our people. The point of this net really is to just make sure your station's up to snuff, to try different things out. If you have a portable station, it's great. If you got a secondary place you like to go to, or some areas that you might be deployed to, these are great times that that at this time on this frequency, we're going to be going through a roll call. I'll have people out there that can give me a signal report. I can test my station. I can test my setup. I can do things like that. We also work with our county EMA and our hospital people. We do monthly FM RACES nets on the local repeater. So what we did is we've worked each of our county hospitals. There's 4 hospitals in our county. And we've set up a RACES station in each one of these 4 hospitals. It's a small 2-meter station. It's literally a 2-meter EmComm radio and an antenna and a power supply. It's all it is, but they help us set up the antenna and get the coax and stuff run. And what we can do with that is help them provide, if communications throughout the county go down, if a hospital's starting to fill up, they can get back to the emergency management center and say, hey, I need you to divert people to another hospital, or hey, we can take more, or we need these supplies. It's another form of communication that those hospitals can work through together to understand what's happening in the county. At our emergency operations center at the county seat, there's a FM station that we can also contact these county hospitals, but there's also an HF station. And that HF station is used to get back to the statewide organization if necessary. So you kind of think of it, everything's kind of distributed out. We get back to the emergency operations center, and then we can get to the state center. And other people have stations at their house, those weekly nets. I check into the weekly net a couple times from my home station to make sure that I can hear everybody throughout the Western Pennsylvania region, and I can communicate with those people, and that my station's working and everything correctly. So that's kind of, some of the drills that we do when it comes to RACES. And those are actually coordinated and run through the emergency management organization. We coordinate with the hospitals and stuff on that. So this is a little different than like 5Ks and those kind of things that we use for practice. Another thing to not forget, and it's very important, and I think a lot of people, sometimes, you got your club and you're in your county or your area. I don't know how you guys are set up necessarily, but we have basically every county seems to have its own group, its own home club for the county, its own RACES organization, its own ARES organization. I know, the county south of us is just not, they don't have stations in the hospitals right now, but they're looking to do that. And we try and do joint operations with these other counties. We've got to remember that these disasters usually don't stop at the state or county line. We try and do organization drills and different things and get to know the people in the counties to the west and the counties to the east and north and south and just all around us. We're on the western edge of Pennsylvania, so you go into Ohio. Well, their ARES organizations are organized differently, but you get to know the people and you get to work with them. And the more familiar you are with one another and how everybody does things, we try and have all of our radios programmed to all the frequencies of all the repeaters in our county and surrounding counties. So if I need to, I can hop over to a county, to the east of us and kind of give them a heads up. Hey, this is what we had going through. It looks like it's headed your way, because most of the storms go, west to east, but they can go different directions. So just some things to remember, when you're doing these drills and you do these things and you get set up in your county, don't stop at that county line, kind of move on. Another thing, during the drills that we'll do is how do we use a backup repeater? We have assigned simplex frequencies. We've got things that are all set up and ready ahead of time. Our simplex frequencies are mapped out by county. So I've got my simplex frequencies for my county in the radio, but I've also got the simplex frequencies for the nearby counties in the radio, just in case. And, we'll be doing one of these drills, our monthly FM Races Net. And every so often, one of us will go up and we'll key up and shut down the repeater, and we'll just see what happens. And it's funny, the first time you do it, people are like, oh, I just thought the net just quit. No, the repeater went down. And so a bunch of people went to the backup frequency, or they went to the backup repeater, or they went to the simplex frequency, that kind of stuff to practice without, prompting it, like, okay, at 6:25, we're going to shut down the repeater and everybody needs to go here. Well, that's easy to tell people, but if it just happens, we were doing the net and it just got quiet. I always, got two VFOs on the radio. I've always got one on the backup. Hey, traffic seems like it's moving over there. I think they must be having an issue. Just some things that you can come up with, having that fallback plan, how to get everyone on the same page during an emergency. One of the things that we've done on some of these drills is we've tried to find, high points in our county. Know your terrain, know your topology of your county, so where these high spots are that you can do relay stations. We have a ridge running north and south about a third way from the eastern border of the county, and we've got one hospital that's down in a hole there, and the hospital can hit the repeater just fine, but that repeater is at almost 200 feet. If that repeater goes down, how do we get to that hospital? Right? The simplex from simplex, I can't get there. So that's not going to happen. So we have some areas, we've got some places that, even if it's just as simple as a person going to that high spot with a little portable antenna and a radio that can relay traffic back and forth and practice that relaying of traffic. Like, okay, I'm going to get the information here, and then I'm going to repeat it back to here, and how that goes through, because that's kind of an art in and of itself. So like I said, just get to know people, get to know that kind of stuff. That's not stuff that you're just going to figure out when something happens. We'll figure it out. No, I can't talk to this hospital. Where do I go? I don't know. Let me try and pull out a map. That's not the time you want to be figuring it out. You kind of want to know that stuff and be prepared ahead of time. Works really well when you show the emergency management organization that this stuff, and you can start plotting points. Well, hey, if you can get me to here, I can get you communications to there. Okay. We'll get somebody to help you. So those are the RACES drills. Our ARES drills are a little bit different. There can be more of them. They can be a little bit less structured. Like I said, these work with served agencies. The biggest one we do a lot of times is, ARES stations at the Red Cross shelters. We can help them with their drills. A lot of times we have what's called a memorandum of understanding with them, that they've written a thing saying, we will use you guys for communications. And when we do our drills, we'll invite you to our drills so you can help us. Yes, it's easy. They can do their drills and they can all use their cell phones, and that stuff works great sometimes. But it's nice to know that we've practiced with them. We've been able to help them get set up. So these served agencies can be varied from anything, Red Cross, local organizations. The photo you see here is from Penn State Shenango. It's a small branch campus of Penn State. They run a 5K every year, and they asked us if we could come do radio for them so they could know what's going on the course. A 5K takes people about an hour to run. By the time we set up, we're there less than an hour and a half. And we set everything up. We go out and we tell them when they're hitting here. We tell them if a water stop's running out of water and they need extra water. They could run the 5K without us, but it works really well with us, helps us get some training, gives them a little bit more information. So, for marathons, bike races, 5Ks, we've got all those kind of things that we have going along. We do some things with some different schools and organizations, just when they're, providing traffic and just different things that we can do. The best thing is prepare. The more we do these training exercises, the more we understand how our equipment works, how our county is laid out, it helps us out. We do these things with the Red Cross. We know where they're going to have their shelters. So we know, okay, this shelter is going to be a problem spot. I need a crossband repeater. I need a relay station up here, or we need this, or this. So just all of that kind of stuff to work together every day is going through it. One of the longer ones we do a long bike race for the MS 150. It goes from down near Pittsburgh all the way up to Conneaut, Ohio. So, I mean, it covers multiple counties, multiple states. It's a 2-day event. Every SAG vehicle. So the SAG vehicles on the course are the ones that help people if they get a flat tire, if they wreck and hurt something on their bike, they can help transport the bike and the riders to the next rest stop, or kind of shuttle them up through the course, or help fix them, or, put a new tire in, or we do a lot of that kind of stuff. So we put ham radio people with radios in each one of those vehicles, because cell coverage is good, but it's a lot easier with radio to just basically say, hey, this is what we need. And it goes to everybody instead of trying to text, and I mean, they don't allow people to text and drive. So you have to have 2 people in the car anyway. And just having the radio there has really helped us out a lot. Because sometimes you'll send somebody a message and they're down in a cell hole where there's no coverage and they didn't get the message. You can't call that person. You can't get a hold of them. But if we know the course and we've provided good coverage on our repeaters and simplex frequencies, we know how to get a hold of those people. So they're really appreciative of it, when that kind of stuff comes up. But reach out to local organizations, find people that are doing things like, hey, you might not need us, but we'd love to help you with this. It helps us train, and it might give you something worth, something extra to work through. Once again, preparation. I cannot stress preparation and drills and training and just knowing what you're going to do. I joked about, having a generator or my power never going out, but what good is my station if I don't have power? Power goes through, something goes through, I don't have any power. What do I do? I can maybe run on batteries for a while. That's a good thing. That's not bad, being able to run on battery. Remember, we had a lot of people got into Go kits really crazy one time, and it's great. And I think Go kits are a really good thing. But I think one of the things that was missed when our group did our Go kit stuff was it's more than just your radio gear, right? When you're going into these places to help, you need to be able to be self-sufficient. You need to be able to take care of yourself completely. My Go kit has sleeping bags, it has some food, it has water, it has, enough stuff for me to basically a tent, extra clothing. It has stuff for me to be able to basically survive and not be a burden on, this organization that's trying to help people. They're going into an area that was hit by something, tornado, whatever it is, and people need help. Well, I don't want to go there and start taking their food. I mean, that food is for the people that are in that organization. I'm coming to help. I need to be self-sufficient. So we did our Go kits, and everybody showed how great they had these custom, cut out things for the radio and their batteries and all the antennas and things. And you got to have that as well, but you got to have stuff for yourself. So your Go kit, just make sure, has enough to keep you self-sufficient. Emergency power for your station. I talked a little bit about a battery and a generator. I mean, those things, are pretty good. I can probably go 8 to 12 hours on one tank of propane. I only have a little 40 pounder that I use, but that also, depending on what I'm running, I can stretch that out. So short term, that's a short term thing. Sometimes you might want to go longer term. How far out do you plan this to last? Hopefully this emergency doesn't last for days and weeks, but as we've seen, down in Texas, when that storm went through, it was a long time that people were without power. I already talked about hazmat training, a good thing to know, a good thing to understand, a good thing to be a part of, just to understand what's out there and what you could be getting involved with. And Skywarn training. Our county still does Skywarn. It seems to me the National Weather Service, in a lot of respects, is kind of wanting to go to social media, and they've gotten away from the amateur radio stuff a little bit, but we still got a few people with the National Weather Service that understand the importance of amateur radio, that, I'm not going to be able to tweet to them or to send them a Facebook message if everything's down. So understanding that training, having that training to know what's coming, be able to look at things, be able to understand what's going on out there in the sky. And when you give a report, you're giving good, accurate information to the National Weather Service so they know what's happening. So, like I said, when disaster strikes, when something does happen, we're called out, we grab our go kit, we go to our shelter, we go to wherever we're going to do. What is our job? Number one, safety, safety, safety. I could probably keep writing safety, safety, safety. We always talked about in different situations, seem safe. We had a lot of stuff with inert gases. And if you went into a room and the gas level was too low and somebody passed out, you walk up, you're like, oh my gosh, that person's, laying in there. I got to get them out. You run in, take 2 breaths of this stuff, take 2 breaths of that nitrogen, high nitrogen air, and boom, you're down. Now you're part of the problem again. So take a second, understand what you're getting into. The safety of all operators and all involved has to be the top priority. Don't run into the disaster, know the area, and listen to the emergency response personnel. If you're like, hey, I need to get over there, and they're like, well, we need to keep you out for this reason, explain why you're there. You're there for communications, and do what you can to help, but don't be a part of the problem. Are you prepared? The more you know about the area, the type of communication issues you're going to face, the easier it is to focus on your primary task instead of just using that time to figure it out. And this is what I said. This is what's made good events and good drills, bad drills, and good emergencies and bad emergencies. I mean, we don't want emergencies, and we're lucky where we're at that we don't have that many of them, but that kind of breeds some complacency that people don't prepare. They don't see the need to prepare, and they don't understand, why should I do all this work? We never get anything around here that we need to use this. Well, the one time it happens, you're going to be trying to figure it out, and you're not going to be efficient. You're going to put people into harm's way. You might not get that critical message where it needs to go because you were trying to figure it out. And that is our job, really. Our job in emergency communication is getting the important information to those that need it. Whether that's passing on needed supplies for your shelter that you're at, receiving information from somewhere that needs to go to the EMA director so they can make an informed decision about what's happening in their district, sending health and welfare messages to a concerned family member. Somebody shows up at a shelter and says, I don't know, is my mom okay? All right, well, where's your mom located? Okay, well, we have a shelter here. Let me call out and see if, we can find out where she's okay. Everything's good. It's good to have that information, or, we can say, hey, they was directed here. This is where you need to go to find them. Directing emergency personnel around potential hazardous situations. If somebody's trying to respond to something and they would normally get from here to here, but this area is blocked with a bunch of downed trees, and hey, let's get that information to them so they can get where they need to go as efficiently as possible. That few minutes you save them from hitting that block, having to turn around and go a different way, could mean the difference between somebody being okay or not. So all of that stuff, we're a conduit for that information. A lot of these organizations have come up with their own communication schemes. A lot of them have their own radios. They've got different technologies in use. And, we don't necessarily need to be an expert in there. We need to know our stuff, because our stuff is the stuff we know that we've tested. And when we're called in, that's our primary task. The firefighters are looking over their gear. They're looking over their tankers and their trucks and everything like that. They're making sure that's in tip-top shape. The radio is one of the things that they look into, and that's good. And they take care of that stuff. But that's our thing that we look into, and we need to know it. We need to know it. We need to know, they hit the button, and if it doesn't work, they're not setting up portable repeaters necessarily. They may not have that knowledge. That's where we need to go. And most importantly, I've seen this a lot of times, this is not the time to rag chew. You're trying to get a message across and 2 people are just chatting about different things. There have been so many events I've gone to where I've gone in, I've checked into the station that I'm at, and I've maybe passed no traffic for an hour. That's okay. I mean, it's okay to maybe once in a while ask for a radio check if you haven't heard anything. Maybe check the other repeaters, check different things, have that kind of stuff set up, but keep the airwaves open. The biggest thing is when that information needs to pass, the airwaves need to be open so we can pass. Be professional. Don't rag chew. Some of the most, boring events are some of the most successful. We get there, we get the information passed that needs to pass, and we move on. So we'll talk a little bit about different operations and what they can do and how they work. I'll be honest, we drilled on digital modes for probably a year. We used FL Digi, MT63 2K over FM, Olivia 8 500 over HF. We practiced this. We sent messages back and forth. We learned how to hook our radios up through signal links to the computers and do all of this stuff. And we were like, I'll be honest, I was the first one sitting around. I see no point in this. I'm sitting here and I'm doing this stuff and I'm setting all this up, and I can do this a lot faster just using 2-meter voice. I don't understand why I'm doing this. It doesn't make sense. We did another drill a little bit later after we practiced and trained, and this was one the county did. This was probably 10 years ago, but it was a mass inoculation drill, pandemic mass inoculation drill. Kind of funny when you look at it now, but we had 2 repeaters that we used. We used one for digital reports and we used one for voice traffic. And it was when we started doing this and we actually used this in a situation that I understood why this kind of made sense. If they're sending you, if they could come over to me with a spreadsheet on a USB drive with a bunch of supplies that they needed, and they were drug names or whatever, they were, complicated long words that you really can't pronounce, and you're trying to phonetically do these over the radio. I could plug it in, bring up the spreadsheet, hit send, convert it to a comma separated file, send it over MT63 2K to the EOC, where the amateur radio operator there had a printer, hit print, and walked up to the EMA director and the group there, and they're like, okay, this is what they need. And there was, with the checksums and everything that go through that, we know that the words were correct. Whereas we could flip things around, and some of those things, if you flip those around, it means something completely different. So it made more sense when we were doing some of that. Having that second repeater for the digital reports, I could do an hourly report, how many people went through, and I didn't have to sit there and wait. I could just, all right, that repeater's open right now. I'm going to go ahead and send it. And it showed up on their screen as a form. And then somebody else would go, one of the other stations would log on. They'd hear that transmission. They'd be like, all right, I'm going to wait. Once that transmission was over, they could just transmit theirs. And in the meantime, we were still using voice for other tasks. So worked out really well. It kind of gave me an idea of why this was a little more important for us to use these digital modes. There's definitely more setup. We had to have laptops and radios and separate radios and things like that, power supplies that you couldn't just do with an HT. So it was different, but it was a good. That's the kind of stuff that you really want to learn and practice, and you understand why that stuff's a little more important. So we talked a little bit about our HF nets that we use, and NVIS is a technique. It's an operating technique. It's called near vertical incident skywave, and I can do a whole presentation on NVIS for folks. We've designed a few NVIS antennas that are really neat. But the point of the NVIS is not for DX transmission. It's not trying to talk to people in France or on the West Coast. It's to talk to people in a localized area, 200 to 300 miles. I know with my NVIS antenna here, I can hit Michigan and about half of Pennsylvania, probably down to about you guys. That's probably about the range of it. Is a very high takeoff angle. And one of the things they do is they tune to, you spray a fire hose at the ceiling and all the water comes down around you. That's what you're trying to do. They call them sky burners because most of the vertical energy, the radiated energy is like 90 degrees up. This is really good for regional communications. Another thing this is really good for is areas with a lot of terrain. If you set up one of these antennas, if you're down in a pretty steep valley, you shoot up, bounce it off the ionosphere above you, and you can get up out of that valley. So sometimes if you can't get a relay station on the top of the hill because it's inaccessible or whatever reason, you can use HF down in that valley with NVIS. So like I said, we generally use FM to get to the county EMA, and there we do HF back to the state, but it doesn't have to be. If I'm down in a valley and my neighbor is only a couple hundred or a couple miles over the ridge, I can use NVIS to get signals to him. Once again, it comes back to knowing your terrain, knowing the techniques you can use to get your signal where it needs to go. So that's another one of the operating techniques. APRS. you know, this is the automatic packet reporting system. Some people can call this the automatic position reporting system. Well, that's one use of APRS, but it's actually just a packet signal. And I noticed on your website, you guys had a packet thing. So I don't know if packet's still valuable down in your area or not, but it's kind of, who uses packet anymore? It's the old data terminals. But a packet is just a chunk of data. And with APRS, it's a way to relay this data across a network. It's used to transmit real-time information. It can be sending messages, bulletins, announcements, and or the locations of any of the stations or objects via amateur packet radio. In the US, we use the VHF 2-meter frequency of 144.39. I actually run an iGate here most of the time. So if people are driving by and they're broadcasting APRS information, it'll take it and put it out on the internet forum so you can see where those things are. We use this a lot in search and rescue. The guys will have APRS enabled radios that have a GPS in them. And so when we're doing a search, somebody can sit at incident command. We've got a repeater set up, not necessarily a repeater. We got a 2-meter radio set up, listening for these APRS packets coming in, and they're telling us where all the search folks are. So we can kind of then watch their track. We can see where they've gone. We can see what areas they've covered, and we can direct people to get to areas that maybe haven't been covered. That's the whole point of APRS. We can send messages out to people. We obviously can communicate over voice as well, but it's automatically sending this message data back. Weather stations, a lot of the weather stations transmit APRS information. So I could be sitting there, and if there's a weather station near us as we're doing a search, I can also be getting weather information. And this is stuff that's coming in through the APRS network, not some internet connection that I'm relying upon. So knowing where those digipeters are repeaters for those digital packets, knowing where those pieces are and how to access that is an important aspect as well if you have that in your county. How is it useful? No, we're different. I already talked about this. We use this in some of our events. We also use it in the MS rides, where those SAG vehicles with the bike races, we run APRS on those. So the guy running the race, if he gets a message or, hey, I've got a biker that's down here, we know who the closest person is. We know how to get those people there. So just some more information. We know where the different teams are, where they've been, all that kind of stuff. So this is one we started working on, and our new emergency coordinator is really, he wants a mesh network, and I'm kind of tempering it. It's this Arden mesh. I've started playing around with this a little more extensively, actually, the past probably 4 or 5 months, and it's really kind of neat. It's a really great technique for using a fast deployment to an affected area, so you can come on scene, and one of the guys that's working through this with us had it best. He says, I can come on scene, I can join the local network of computers and stations and whatnot over this Arden mesh without having to meet with the IT guy, right? I mean, we can set up Arden mesh is basically a mesh network it's a wireless network. It's no different than Wi-Fi in your house. It uses 2.4 gig, it uses 5.8 gig, it uses the same frequencies. We do have access, because of our amateur radio license, of a few channels on those frequencies that aren't for normal consumer use. So as we all know, the 2.4 gig area is pretty crowded right now. There's just stuff all over it. We get channels like -1 and -2 that aren't on the normal network out there. And it's kind of neat to see how it works. But at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, what is this for? This is a bit more technical. But this is a way to connect multiple computers over radio. Has to be line of sight. So it's shorter distances. I mean, we do have some networks that we've been able to shoot 6-7 miles, but those aren't things that just get set up on the fly. You don't just get it and point the antenna and say, all right, I got a mesh network. There's a little bit more involved in lining things up. But it's a way that multiple GoKit setups can talk to each other with relative ease. One example is in Washington County, Pennsylvania. They have an air show, and at the main trailer, they've got a mesh network set up. and then they go out, they've got a couple remote mesh nodes set up that they go out and point back, and it's over an airport. So it's a pretty decent sized area, but it's not, the full county. And they can actually transmit video back to the command center. And so he can actually bring up on his screen, multiple cameras from different areas. How far can you go with those? Well, it depends on how far you develop that mesh. Another use a group uses it for is their field day. Their field day setup is about 1,200 feet long, and they've got trailers for each station set up, and they've got the logging software running on a computer. Well, that logging software is hooked to a mesh node, and everybody knows the address of that node, how to get to it. So they bring their computer over, and it connects through the mesh. It doesn't matter if the computer's at one end or the other or in the middle. With that mesh, they all talk and they know what's what and what's where. So that's the part that is really interesting on it. You still have to have some, a little bit of networking and IT setup. In the end, the mesh network is just the network. You still have to do something with it, right? You still have to have some kind of service, and you have to know a little bit about networking. Some of the services people can use, obviously, I've talked about video, streaming video. There's a chat, like a little chat server you can run. You can set up print servers. So, I can come on if your county has it set up, and we've got the incident command vehicle has a printer there, and it has a mesh node. Once I get it set up, it doesn't matter if everybody comes in, they get on the mesh. Even if they can't see the incident command, as long as they can get to that node through the other nodes, they'd be able to print to that printer. That it gives it, you don't have to sit there and go, okay, well, I have to route this through Bill, who's over here, and Joe, who's here, to get to there. No, you don't have to set the routes up. You don't have to set IP addresses up, but you still have to know some networking. Obviously you can set up your own custom web apps. There's a lot of things that you can do with it. It's just, where do you want to go with it? And that's what I always ask people. What's the purpose of you using this technology? What's the goal? What is the end goal? Do you want to provide this? Do you want to provide that? We've talked about setting up and being able to connect all our hospitals in a mesh node. Obviously, that ridge over on the one side of our county really causes an issue. So we'd have to have some place in the middle to help go over that. And you probably want two for redundancy. But we've talked about that. What could we do with that? Well, we could set up a VoIP system between the four hospitals that it's using amateur radio, but the hospital person doesn't need to have us. We're controlling the network, and they can get on the phone. Now, of course, the other thing you have to be careful with this is you can provide internet service through this. So sometimes, internet will get taken out of an area. You go in with a bunch of mesh nodes, connect back to a point that has internet access, and you can get internet access into those affected areas. But just remember, with our amateur radio license, you can't use encryption, right? Everything has to be in the open, has to be kind of out there. So an HTTPS website, you really can't go to anything anymore that isn't an HTTPS website. So what's the use, or what are you going to get on that? You can do mail, but you can't do secure mail. So there's things you have to be careful for, and just to make sure you're following within your terms of a license. But the mesh networking, like I said, we've been playing around with it a little bit. I put it in here when I first did this because I knew that the one group used it. And now that we're starting to learn more about it, it's an interesting technology. As an IT guy, I kind of like, well, how does it not have duplicate IPs, and how does this work? And watching how they figure that stuff out is kind of neat. But it's also something that, if you don't have a little bit of networking experience, it's going to be a lot harder to understand what you can do with it. So those are the main topics I had to cover. I guess I'll open it up to any questions.
All right. Well, that was a great presentation. So yeah, folks, if you're on the Zoom session, you can either type something in the chat window, or if you have a microphone, you can unmute, of course. And of course, there in the room, you guys can filter some questions in, maybe through Brian, or maybe the mic will pick them up okay. And you have any questions for Cory?
And if you don't have something on, emergency communications, DX engineering, and try and answer anything I can,
I'll just
The relays, is that more similar to what we did with you guys did down there in McCoy County with the Jeep Relay Valley?
So the question, Corey, on our side, I think you can hear me, is we're talking about doing relay stations. We had an event last year. We're going to probably do it again this fall. There's a Jeep Overland event, and we provide radio communications along the route in case there's flat tires or somebody needs assistance or medical assistance. And we were one. What was the question again, Steve?
Is that what he was similar to what he was talking? What we did, what you guys did down there in McCoy County with the relays?
So what types of events might you have used relay type radio communications and relays in the community?
Those, I mean, honestly, it's stuff that covers an area. So I said, knowing your area, knowing your coverage. If you're doing an overland type of thing, I might have good coverage here with this repeater. I might have good coverage with this repeater. I might not have a repeater here. So how do I get communication between those different points? As I say, knowing your area, we would set somebody up and say, okay, you're going to go here. Or a lot of times what I do is that, I'll have my radio, I'll set it in crossband repeat. I'll drive it someplace because I know I don't have coverage down here, but I can drive up to the top of the hill, park my vehicle, and then I can communicate to that with my HT and get out to everybody. Or you have somebody that's there doing a simplex relay where they take the traffic in and then relay it out. And that takes practice. That's not something that you just tell a new ham, all right, go here and relay traffic. They can get confused, but it's all right, timing, using the net controls, having the person, okay, I got a message. Okay, give me your message, the whole protocol of how you go about that. But yeah, those kind of events are what we would use relays for.
Right. The other thing that we have begun to use more of as a club to potentially be utilized for community events and emergency type events is having them. We have a trailer that can do HF and VHF, UHF, GMRS, and some others.
I missed the last part of that. I heard you guys have a trailer and you've got it set up with different types of communication. What was the last part of that?
So we have an emergency communications trailer, and I was wondering what were some creative ways that you've been using your EmComm trailers out in the community? Okay.
I mean, really the biggest thing with the EmComm trailer, for the most part, it provides a nice place out of the weather that you can actually move around in, right? You get in, to some of these places and, I remember one of them, it started raining on us. We were getting all the bikers off the course. It was one of those bike races and you're trying to keep everything dry. You're getting rained on. Having that trailer is nice. It also can provide a central location for whatever it happens to be. When we do some of these longer things, we try and locate that kind of in the middle, just that way we can kind of get both directions, or we locate it wherever the organization that we're serving has their headquarters. So they have a place that it's very visible that they can go to. Another good thing is too, it provides outreach. You see the trailer, what, people start asking questions and you can start talking about what it is we do. Creative wise, it's another station, right? But it's a station that we try and all get familiar with. And I think that's probably one of the things, I'm familiar with my radios, you're familiar with your radios. But if we try and standardize on radios, that works to a point, but we're all volunteers, right? We're not all just given radios to go do what we need to do. But the trailer has a radio and you try and get people in it to know how to use that radio, get them more familiar with that. So when they come in, they can do that kind of stuff. So another neat thing that I do, and people call me crazy, but this is just something before every event, I take my radio and I reset it to factory standard. And then I go in and I hand program in most of my frequencies. And they're like, well, why do you waste that time? Because, when I get on scene, I might use this radio. I've got a couple different radios. I've got ICOMs, I've got Yaesus, I've got different radios. But I get there and they're like, oh man, we need to change repeaters. Oh, and you know what? This repeater we're using, it has a 1 meg split. All right, no problem. I know how to program my radio. I know how to do the weird splits. I know how to set the the right tones and the right receive frequencies. And I know how to do all that because I just program my radio myself. You know, if you're reliant on your computer to, you know, chirp or some of the RT system software or something like that to always program your radio, and you show up and like, hey, by the way, we need to change something, and you're going, I don't know how to get on that frequency. It's just, like I said, it's one of those stupid things that I do. You know, a couple days before the event, I reset my radio and I learn where all the buttons are and what commands are what, because every radio is a little bit different depending on what I'm using that trip. So
It's not a bad idea. I like that.
I had a question.
Mhm.
So, do you think that it would be a good thing to build like a maybe even like a solar powered deployable repeater that you could go to a high spot and set up, like especially in an area like this where there's a lot of hills and stuff, that you could go up and set up like an impromptu or something just to leave there for a short time to allow, you know, even emergency services to use it or something like that? Would that be something good to build one or two of, you know, to be able to deploy?
I mean, that's, you know, that's the kind of stuff you have to think about, right? And I think that's a very good thing. You know, I mean, solar powered, you know, you want to make sure you have enough battery backup to make it, you know, the batteries, size your battery power basically enough to last what you think you're going to need, and then give you some solar to give you that extra boost, that extra time frame. But yeah, I mean, you know, I'm in Ohio now and it's flat. I look out my window and I just see cornfields, and it's, you know, that's great. When I was over in Pennsylvania, my wife lives in Eastern Pennsylvania, and you go over there, down where you guys are, you've got areas that you're going to be down in the middle of nowhere. And if you know that, you know, we had a rest stop on one of our, there's a 100-mile run where it was a 25-mile course around this park, and they do 4 laps, and it lasts for like 18, 19 hours. But one of the aid stations is in the middle of nowhere. It's down in this valley, and they do the same thing. They've got a portable repeater set up that they hike up to the top of the hill, deploy this thing for the event, and it's there for the 18 or 20 hours. And the person that's in that aid station can use that to get out. So that's part of knowing your terrain, knowing what you need. You know, is a portable repeater going to help me here in Ohio? Probably not as much as it would help you guys, but it wouldn't hurt. You know, it's still going to get me further distance. You know, it's still going to get me out further. You probably can get a little bit higher, you know, if you're not just, if it's something that's set up to go up, you can put it up on a taller mast a little bit easier maybe than you could, you know, if you just drive someplace in your car. So it's just, yeah, I mean, that's a good thing to look into, but it's also, like I said, it's about knowing your area. What would you use it for? You know, you don't want to build stuff and spend money just to build stuff and spend money, but kind of think about, all right, here's some areas, here's the high spots in my county. And if I put a repeater at these high spots, what additional coverage does that get me? You know, and if that gets me something that's going to be beneficial, then yeah, I mean, I'd say go for it.
Thank you for that. I had one more question as well. So I've heard people say stuff like, you know, our club got called out to do emergency communications at a different place, not even necessarily in their state, you know, where there might be hurricane or something like that. Is that more races related, or is that Aries, or do they both do that? And what kind of, you know, situation does that come into play where your club may be called to come help somewhere, you know, that you're not necessarily always at?
Yeah, I mean, and you know, one of the things I talk about is preparation and doing this stuff and knowing your area, and that works really well when you're in your area. Something like that. I mean, that could be either. You know, I know a lot of people that they'll call for help when, you know, a big disaster comes through someplace. And so that could be Aries, it could be races. It depends on who's calling you out, right? That's really what that comes down to. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to accomplish is the same thing. We want to go in, we want to help people, we want to be able to get information into these areas and out of these areas that helps whoever we're there serving. So if you're going down to help the Red Cross provide communication because a hurricane came through, then that would probably be under Aries at that point. But the point of that, once again, is, you know, the more you practice these techniques and the more you kind of understand how different organizations work, the easier it is to integrate, right? You go into this area, you don't know the area as well. You're not going to necessarily know the high points. You're going to kind of have to rely on some of the other people that are there to help you with that. And there is an element of figuring it out in that respect. But the other thing I mentioned too is when you get called into those things, make sure you're prepared to be self-sufficient when you're there, so you don't become a burden on the rest of those people that are trying to provide services to the people who need it. But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of both. I know when the the hurricane hit Puerto Rico, there was a call to amateur radio folks to come down and help with communication. And I know some people who went, and I mean, it's not a comfortable thing, but it was there. They were there to help people. They went in, they set up different stations, they operated. They're a body that can help pass traffic. Maybe I've already got the equipment and I need help, and I call your group up and I need you just to man this relay station. You got to have that traffic handling skills. You got to be able to understand how to work, a relay station or whatever. That's the kind of stuff that can really help in those situations. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Anything
All right.
else?
For you folks online in the Zoom session, again, if you have a question, either if you have a mic, you can unmute yourself, or you can type it in the chat, and Cory should be able to see it, or I could relay it to him. But so don't feel like you can't ask a question just because you're on the Zoom session. Anybody else there in the room has any more questions? Just while people are maybe thinking about questions, as a club, we're doing quite a bit of what you've talked about, Cory. Like almost anybody else, we need more practice and more experience and that kind of stuff. But we're doing a fair amount of what you've talked about, and are trying to do even more, like you say, because it's all about the practice and knowing your equipment and trying to have some fun along the way. So we were more than happy to have you come in and give the talk, even though we're doing some of this stuff already, because there's always something you don't know. There's always something you're not practicing enough or whatever it is. So we really appreciate that.
No problem. I mean, no matter what, I mean, it's hard. And I mean, we don't have a lot. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but we don't have a lot of disasters. And it's hard to really, I think the hardest problem we have is drumming up interest in doing some of these drills and doing some of these things, because it's like, well, we never really need to use it. Why? But when it does, it's trying to let people know. It's like, yeah, but when it does happen and we need it, we'll be glad we practiced. And the best thing you can do is try and make the drills and the training fun. Mm-hmm. We always, after any drill or event, we all kind of meet back for dinner and do a quick hot wash. Well, everything's fresh in our mind. What went well? What didn't go well? Hey, yeah, yours was good, but man, your audio is kind of rough. Let's work on your audio. See if we can fix that up a little bit. Maybe it's your mic. Maybe it's, whatever it is, where I couldn't get through when I needed to because we had too much chatter on the airwaves, or just, we had one, I think just a couple weeks ago. I was not there. I was traveling, but the guy was like, yeah, it just didn't go well. I'm like, well, what happened? He said, we just had a bunch of people that just have never done this before, but this is, and that's a good thing. I mean, I'm glad that they were there. It was just, this was a drill, this was training, and that's the point of it. So encourage that, and work with the people to, get new people in. You don't know when it's going to strike. You don't know when you're going to need it. I could be right there and have everything ready to go, or I could be 200 miles away and be out of town. If our emergency coordinator is out of town and something happens, who's going to take over? Is there somebody that, all right, I know this person's out of town. We had this happen. I'm going to hop on and start a net. We tell people for Skywarn, if there's weather coming over, if you hop on the repeater and there's no Skywarn net, start one. You be the one to start one. And then if somebody comes in and says, all right, hey, I can pass this on to you, or I can do this. But, we tell everybody, start it. Start, being part of it and doing it. Don't just sit around and necessarily wait. But we do have a command structure that, okay, we're going to work through it this way. But if you don't, if that person's not there, and you can't rely on one person, is the other aspect of that. Right. Yeah. And again, we're trying to do a lot of that kind of stuff and expand the knowledge base and get people experience running nets. We've been doing a lot of that here recently.
to take the burden off the people who normally run our emergency net and those things, and just give other folks experience. And really, well, once a lot of people run a net, they realize it's really kind of fun.
Yeah.
When it's just a regular net, but you get that practice in there, and then if it is a severe situation, you'll be more comfortable. As you said, it's all about the practice and that kind of stuff. So we're definitely trying to do more, and that's why we did the Jeep event that Brian talked about. We heard about it, and we jumped on it. We're like, yeah, we would love to have this capability to do this simulation and get in the field and look at that terrain. Because they have at least some kinds of stuff, but it was a sign-up event, so it wasn't like they had universal communications or that they worked together either. They had, I forget how many Jeeps that year, and so we wanted to help provide communications, and some of us know that terrain a little better, and it went pretty well. And like you said, we had a sort of that after-action meeting and talked about a few things, and we're looking forward to doing it again this year, and potentially some other events as well for that very reason, because we don't always have a lot of events, which is good, but like you say, then you can't get your practice in, and you can't you're gonna get rusty on that stuff. So we're trying to do a lot of what you've talked about, and we're doing it certainly a fair amount of what you're talking about, and it's just more of it and more of the same to a degree.
Well, we had a couple people that really kind of, I've been interested in the whole mesh thing. I'm a computer guy. I'm into networking, and I was interested in how this mesh thing worked, but I wasn't going to go spend a lot of money on it and have what good's a mesh node of one, right? It's like having your computer with no internet. It's like there's stuff you can do on it, but you're kind of limited. It can't connect to things. I could go out and I could buy a couple pieces and try and set some stuff up, but without having. So we had a couple guys that kind of mentioned it, said they wanted to learn about it. So we said, all right, first Tuesday of every month, we're getting together at this restaurant, and we're going to meet and do it's Tuesday night mesh. And I said start small. I said crawl, walk, then run. Right, we're crawling still. Everybody get this node. That way we can show you how to. Let's show you how to flash it first. Right, go through the process of flashing it, then go through the process of getting them all connected. I created a little self-contained video node that I bring, and I set up somewhere in the restaurant. And then this restaurant doesn't get much traffic, so they love it when we come, because they actually get some people to come and do some stuff. But we go around and we go to different areas and we show how, so we're starting that. And then people start thinking, now what can we use this for? Right now that I don't know what it is. I heard this term and I don't know what to do with it, but I want it. That was one guy. And I was like, all right, well, what do you want with it? And we start walking through it. At the end of the day, it would be nice to have, some of these places that have nodes interconnected all over the place and people can just connect in. But one of the things we're going to do is I'm going to take that self-contained node that I put, I'm going to put the camera up on our tower where our repeater is facing the west, and just give something for guys that live around that tower that can connect to that mesh node somehow by line of sight. Give them something to work towards. All right, I'm going to learn how to get mine flashed. I'm going to learn how to set it up to connect. Now I can look and, oh, look, I've got a camera view, and I mean, it's just, and there's no internet involved. It's just me connecting up to there. And then as more people connect to that, they can do different things like, oh, well, now that he's got this, we can set this up, or we can do this. You got to start playing with it to understand what it can do. But, you're also trying to then teach people networking, which is some people know, some people don't. So it takes a little bit of, it just takes practice. But by doing it and say, we're going to meet every first Tuesday of the month, and bring your questions, bring your stuff. If you buy a new piece of hardware and you want to learn how to flash it, I pulled down every firmware they had on a USB drive. And I said, okay, we'll flash it. Here we go. We'll start working through it and get you connected. So that kind of practice helps, and it's fun. We get together, and sometimes it starts off mesh for about 20 minutes, and the next hour and a half, we're talking about other stuff. But we're having fun, and we've learned a little bit about what we're doing. So it's all you can do.
We've got, these events, which is we started not too long ago, last year or so, partly for some of that kind of reasons. We want to pass on knowledge and skills contained within our club, but also when we have opportunities, bring outside people that can expand on that, on different subject matter experts and things, like you and Tim and people like that. on top of our work days and different things that we're doing. Because we're trying to do that. We're trying to have fun and spread skills and knowledge. You only don't know something until you know it, right? And so a lot of those mountains are really molehills. And my Brian KY4BDP and myself, we're IT folks too, but it doesn't mean our club and other people in our club can't do some pretty technical things. A lot of times, just a little bit of knowledge,
Right.
and as long as somebody can share that knowledge, you don't have to go to to 2 years of technical training to do a certain thing. We've got people who can program radios and that kind of stuff. Austin there was asking a question, KY4DAG. Our DStar, our APRS stuff, and his 3D printer. He's brought a lot of skills to the club too, and we're trying to expand on that. We've got GMRS repeater. We built one, in fact, and we're putting it up. And our secondary site runs totally on solar right now and in a battery pack, and it runs well for us in a remote location on top of a hill. Folks, do we have any other questions? Either there in the room or anybody else here on Zoom? Do you have any questions? He said if it's just on DX Engineering, that's fine too. So if you have any questions, let us know.
I do. I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned briefly Skywarn. In all the training, I've actually taken 2 classes so far, and even when I asked, about how it pertains to amateur radio, they really just kind of glossed over it, like, oh yeah, you can use it to do spotting. No one ever tell exactly how it's supposed to be set up, and I'm not asking for you to go over everything, but what's kind of the structure for that? Is it just that someone needs to get on, like you said, and start a net, and then if they have how do you get that information during a net? Say like no one's there to start a net. How do you get that information to the weather service? Do you call them, or do you try to get them, like involved in the net, or I know like on the website it lists our club president as like the contact for the region. Of course, he's usually available, but do we go through him? What do we do? Could you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's different based on your area, right? A lot of the stuff, they like a lot of their reporting over like different social media stuff and things now. They're doing a lot of that. When you do the training, they usually give you the number that you call to send in reports. Once, you got your spotter number, you can do that. We do the nets. In our one area over in Western Pennsylvania, one of the guys from the National Weather Service is a ham, and he gets on the nets. He likes to he hears it firsthand what's coming through, and he'll sit in his office and he's got a radio and stuff there. So that works for them. Different areas are different, right? As you do your training, they'll kind of tell you how to report that kind of stuff. But the other option is, maybe not everybody on the net has that, but you've got now a distributed network of people in different locations. Hey, the winds are picking up here. Well, I know they're 12 miles south of me and they're calm here. Okay, we can kind of, communicate that, and whoever's going to report that, usually the net control person would be the one that would take that information and report it, or somebody else designated on that net would be like, okay, I'm going to be, hey, I'm net control, Austin, I'm going to have you do the reporting. I'll take the information and then, we'll get it to you to report up, or however you guys structure that really is how that works. And whatever the best way your National Weather Service area would like that, because there's one in Cleveland, there's one in Pittsburgh. I'm not sure if, you guys have one, if it's in Lexington, I'm not sure where yours is, but that's who you would want to get that information to, however they would, prefer it. Maybe you do the net and, hey, I've got internet access still, so I'll go ahead and report it on their website, but nobody else does. Because, you're running on emergency power, your cable's down, you've only got your radio. Well, you get me the weather report and I can get it up to them based on that. So that's, kind of the way that works. And I talk about a train, here it is. So I got a train runs right by my house. So.
And Austin, just to add to that a little bit, I've had a couple of situations where I live, because I'm here in Southeast Lexington, where one morning before work, I was listening to the radio here, and there was a train wreck here in Fayette County, and some of the local hams, they just got on the repeater up here, and they just started sharing that information, and it was just informal, They weren't, going through an official Aries or races or anything like that, but they were just on there. Some people who were in the area, in their vehicles and live near there, and they were just sharing that information for other people who, hear the repeater and monitor the repeater. And then a similar situation was some severe weather going through here, and some people in Berea, which is about 30 miles away from where I am, but we're up and down the I-75 corridor. Again, some hams just informally started sharing information with, okay, yeah, now the heavy winds are at my location, and now the heavy rain has hit my location. And there was 3 or 4 or 5 of us just informally sharing that kind of information for the people that was monitoring, 520 or the local repeaters. So sometimes it can work that way too. If somebody will just start something, if somebody will just start saying, hey, I'm at this mile marker on the interstate and the hail has started, I just stopped under the overpass, So, I mean, you can get that benefit out of it too. It doesn't always have to be completely formal. It's great to participate and help out in those events, but sometimes as hobbyists, we can just help out wherever you are. You could just get on the radio, even if it's on 520, make a few calls, and if there's anybody around, then maybe they'll come back to you and you can help out that way.
So would that, an instance like what you're talking about, would that be a good opportunity to just, like you said, let's make this a Skywarn net in practice, or?
You could make it a little bit more formalized.
practice?
You could make it a little more formal. The two things that I happened to hear and participate in a little bit, it was pretty informal. We really didn't start an official net. We really didn't have a net control. There weren't that many people trying to participate, for one thing. If you get a certain number of people organizing a little bit more, maybe with a net control or something, but it was just maybe half a dozen people just trying to help out some folks, and people were coming and going as they were on their commutes home from work or to work, and that kind of stuff. So it stayed pretty informal. So it kind of would depend on the scale of that situation and how many people were trying to participate. You might try to organize a little bit, because in the one event with the severe weather, it was we had people in Berea, we had people in on the interstate. I was here in Lexington. We had another person other side of Lexington, so we had people kind of all over. It wasn't any one county or even club or anything involved. So it was kept pretty informal, but we can always help out that way in a lot of situations. But if you do practice some of the more formal stuff, you could try to help make sure that you're staying a little bit more on task. Because again, the rag chewing and stuff can sometimes get a little top heavy with that stuff when you're trying to help folks. Even if it's informal, you might want to just try to make sure that the information is getting out there, because you never know who's listening, right? It's the same old thing. You never know who's listening. You might get on there and you might start giving some weather updates. You may never even hear from anybody, but you might have reached 50 people, and they may have appreciated the information, but they may not have come back to you. But that doesn't mean that you didn't reach some folks and help some folks. So it's like anytime you run a net, I'm sure Ben and some of our other members have run into this. If you're going to hold an official net, I know the 10-meter net or the we do have the direct nets and things. It's your turn. You're supposed to go this hour, and you get on and you go, and you may not hear from anybody, but you never know who you reached. I hear it on some of the HF nets. I've heard it on the maritime net and some of those HF nets. They go for certain periods where they're not hearing from anybody, but they just keep going and they keep giving the information and stuff, because there could still be people listening, even if they don't come back. So, you can always take the opportunity to do that kind of stuff. I mean, not that you have to, but if you find yourself in a good situation, you might just do it for the practice for yourself.
And like you said, Chris, too, I mean, as the net, as more and more people start to join, sometimes it starts to get a little more, okay, now, hey, we're going to take this to a formal net, and it's okay. You're just kind of a couple people chatting and more people getting in. Hey, we're getting some weather. Hey, we're getting some weather. All right, hey, let's make this a formal net. We're going to try and take in some weather reports, ask every 10, 15 minutes for any updated reports or any updated information, or, go back and forth. As it gets bigger, that's when that more formal stuff happens and is a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, do what works for you guys and gets people on the air. And remember, this training, we want it to be fun. It's really should be fun. It really should be interesting, because if it gets too strict and too stressful for people won't join. and then you lose out on that. So get people comfortable and work through it. So.
And I don't know if you see the chat, Corey. One of our members was thanking you for the presentation. They enjoyed it. Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Any other questions? Anybody there in the room, or anybody else here on the Zoom session? We've gone a pretty decent time. So, any other questions? All right. Well, we can probably go ahead and let you go, Corey. We really appreciate you taking the time to present to our club, and we do record the sessions. And assuming everything went okay, again, Brian and I are IT folks too, and we know very well that we wouldn't have a job if everything went perfect all the time. But we'll post this on our YouTube channel for our other members who weren't even able to make it tonight. And we also usually put them on some USB thumb drives for folks that like to get it that way. And I hope to work with you folks some more in the future. And we're looking forward to that trip out to Tim's monster shack out there and seeing that stuff too. So any other comments from anybody?
Thanks very much.
I want to say thanks for having me. I mean, I'm glad that, I like it when people are doing stuff, people are active. The best thing to do is get on the air. And I mean, I know sometimes it's a lot harder than others. I mean, I know there's days, that I'm like, oh, I don't even want to turn the radio on today. And then there's days where I'm all excited to do it. So, try and have fun. I mean, that's the point of this hobby. We do this. The emergency communication is an aspect of it. It's one aspect of it. There's a lot of people that get in for different reasons and find what makes you happy with the hobby. And it's a good hobby. There's a lot of good people out there. Since I started working with DX, I've met a lot of neat people and, look forward to meeting a lot more. Maybe we'll see you in Dayton next year. So stop by the booth. We're looking forward to getting back to Dayton. So
Are you folks potentially going to be down at Huntsville?
I think there's a small group. I don't normally go on those
Okay.
ones. We kind of divvy up who goes different ones. There might be a small group, I think, going to Huntsville this year. So
Several of us are going to Huntsville. So if you have any folks there, I'm sure we'll be stopping by your booth as well and introducing ourselves to whoever makes it there. All right, I think that's most of it. Again, we really appreciate it, Corey, and appreciate your time. And we'll go ahead and let you go. And thanks for being here this evening.
All right, 73, everyone.